Abraham loved and trusted God. He and his wife, Sarah, had followed God for many years. They had moved to a new land just because God told them to. God had made Abraham a promise that he would have many children and become the father of a great nation. But there was one problem. Abraham and Sarah were very old. They had no children, and Sarah had never been able to have a baby. It seemed impossible. Still, God repeated his promise. One day, God took Abraham outside and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have." Abraham believed God, even though he didn't understand how it could happen. And God was pleased with Abraham's faith. Time passed, and still, no baby. One day, when Abraham was sitting at the entrance to his tent, he saw 3 men standing nearby. These weren't just ordinary visitors. One of them was the Lord. Abraham hurried to welcome them and offered them food and water. While they were eating, the Lord said something surprising. "I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son." Sarah was inside the tent, listening. When she heard that, she laughed to herself. She thought, "How could a worn-out woman like me have a baby? And my husband is also old." But the Lord heard her laugh and said, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord?" That question is at the heart of this story. Is anything too hard for God? The answer is no. A year later, just as God had said, Sarah gave birth to a baby boy. They named him Isaac, which means laughter. Sarah said, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." She was joyful, and Abraham was thankful. God had done exactly what he promised. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born, and Sarah was 90. What seemed impossible to people was not impossible for God. This story shows us something very important. God keeps his promises, even when it looks like there's no way. Abraham and Sarah waited a long time, and at times, they struggled to believe. But God was faithful. It also reminds us that nothing is too hard for God, even when the situation seems hopeless. God is still able to work. Sometimes, we may not understand his timing, but he sees the whole picture, and he knows what's best. So, if you're waiting for something, or if something feels too big or too broken, remember Sarah's laugh. Remember Isaac, the baby born from a promise. And remember the words God spoke. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this Bible story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories from God's Word. See you next time.